Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. I am your host, Kelly Meehan, a citizen of the universe and a passage keeper and mentor for our new Earth children. I believe we are entering into a new psychic structure of our reality, and it is meant to embody deeper trust and ways into solid self-love and fearless integrity. Our new world energy of spirit babies needs us to consciously create within conception, trust pregnancy, and have freedom to birth and parent from innate wisdom. This is Spirit Baby Radio. Welcome to episode 209, April 2025. The Children for the New Earth. Every child heals our planet. What will our present energies hold for our children into the future? How can we show up with our hearts tuned in? How do we trust communication and receive spiritual depth and higher ways into consciousness? What about children on the spectrum or other neurodiversities? I have a special guest episode. I'm always really excited. All different guests coming in. Suzy, welcome, Suzy.
Thank you for having me.
And those know that you can catch the video, of course, on the YouTube, and then you have it through the podcast. And I always like to talk about how I handpick most of all my guests. Like, where did she come from? Actually, it was from Judy. Judy, this woman, Judy. I don't know if you know Judy. You probably know a lot of people. And she's like, oh, you have to connect with Suzy because she talked about blue star energies. And then I found you on this podcast and I was just like popcorn, just taking it all in. And I thought, wow, I was like, I wonder if Suzy would come and talk about this amazing energy because I'm doing the work before life, right? And it's like, and I'm sure there's an overlapping in that. And then there's a movie on telepathy. I saw Am I saying that right?
The
Teletech.
telepathy.
Yeah, I found that on your website and I thought I'm gonna buy the movie. I want to see it. I'm very, very curious. It looks pretty incredible. And
Well, it's
maybe
actually not quite out yet, but the
oh, it's
telepathy tape.
not. Oh.
No, that the what you're seeing on that piece on my website is it's a little clip. It's like a sizzle reel or something for one that's coming. And then, but Kai Dickens does have the telepathy tapes podcast, which is
Oh, okay.
amazing. So
All
that's
right.
something everybody should really check out. It's an amazing podcast.
Thank you. I love that you shared that. We'll definitely check that one out. So I'm going to read a little bit of your bio and then we're going to kind of jump in. Suzy, a former pediatric speech language pathologist and the founder of Blue Star Education and Research, Suzy collaborates with scientists, educators, therapists, inventors of new technologies, and has mentored professionals and parents for close to 3 decades on how to support the integration of vibrationally aware individuals, including those diagnosed on the autism spectrum. She's a frequent speaker on podcasts related to evolving consciousness and the roles those diagnosed on the spectrum play in human evolution. Suzy currently offers monthly energetic balance sessions to successfully navigate these changing times. In addition, her New World Portal community is quickly becoming the go-to for understanding and living the new human experience. And she has a book called, am I going to say that right? Can you say that? Awesome.
Awesomeism. Yeah, I know. It's a weird
Awesomeism.
word, but it
Yeah,
works.
I'm not a word person. That's why too. I'm like put everything in pictures. I could live a happy world life, but letters and words. And the title of the book is A New Way to Understand the Diagnosis of Autism, and you can get this through Amazon and of course through a website, which you will see in the show notes. So all right, Suzy, we were just talking and I don't know if we're going to get into, we were just talking about birth. We were talking about her birth. So everyone knows I'm so fascinated by how we're born and what that story brings, because as we are, the inner infant is here, we are present. But Suzy, where do we begin? Like you know how this works. Tell us about, this work that you do. I know you come from that educational space and you work with yeah, tell us who you work with and more about that. Thank you.
So, yeah, I kind of made the jump from pediatric speech language pathologist, private practice, the whole, mainstream kind of experience to kind of being a multidimensional communicator and seer, like within a day. It was really kind of a crazy experience. And all at the hands of a little 4-year-old boy diagnosed with autism. So it was really my first clue that this population was much more than we perceive them to be. You know, I walked in with the eyes of a pediatric speech language pathologist at the time when the incidence of autism was 1 in 10,000.
Mm.
So I had no education in it because there was no reason to teach about it. It was very rare. And so, but just having this kid, this little 4-year-old, who was saying all kinds of weird things, but didn't really have clear communication. To have that kid walk up to me, which he did, and looked me directly in the eye and just said, Master. And
Mm.
when he said that single word, master, I thought, who's the master here? It's like there was just something else going on altogether. And what kind of really pushed me over the edge, you might say, is when I worked with him in the back of the daycare center, he's walking around, he's saying, it's the millennium, it's 1999. And he just kept repeating that. And I'm still thinking he's a weird little kid, and I'm not exactly sure what to do with him. So I just sit down on the floor and I thought, okay, I love kids. I'll just give him some space to get to know me. And as I'm sitting with my back against the door and he's walking around, all of a sudden, I just saw like this body of light
Mm.
floating above his physical body. And so you get this little cute little cherub of a kid, big brown eyes, 4-year-old. And it was like somebody had made a cutout doll of him and put it up above him. But it was like this bright white kind of, I don't know, plasma-y looking light. And the only thing that connected the two bodies was a little tail. It was like a tail that went off the foot of the light body and dropped down in through his forehead, through the top of his head, and just kind of was dangling in his heart. And I'm never seen anything like that before in my life. So I'm rubbing my eyes, trying to get it to go away. It doesn't go away. And so you do what any sane person does. You like, what the heck am I seeing? What is that? And when I said that in my head, I heard this little boy's voice, and he said, that's my light body. You're here to put my light body back into my physical body.
Wow. And then
And
what? And then you're like, okay.
for some, yeah, Kelly, that's a good question. It's like, really, what? No, the first question was how? It's
Okay, yeah,
like,
that's a good answer. That's a good answer.
it's like the first thing was like, why do you think I can do this? Second was, how are we going to do this? What the heck's going on here? It was like there was a million things happening all at the same time. But what was strange, in all honesty, is I knew I could do it. I mean, I
Wow.
knew myself around children enough to know that if a little kid was asking for my help, that I was going to listen
Mm.
to whatever he wanted, no matter how that was coming across. It just happened to be coming across initially through telepathy,
Mm.
which I had to work that out later. It was like I was just getting the message from this kid that there was something I could do to be of support, and that was enough to hook me and take me on the ride of a lifetime. So.
Wow. I mean, I love the way you just shared that. It's like, yeah, it happened and you showed up for it though. I feel like that's the power in it. Like you could have ignored it, right? Or no?
Well, kind of. I mean, I tried to at
Oh, you
least
did?
initially.
Yeah. You're like,
Like I'm rubbing my
yeah,
eyes
you're
and
like,
I'm
is
like
this
I'm going, no, no,
happening?
no, 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 no.
Yeah.
And but there's for whatever reason, it's like I think we all have those moments in our life
Yeah.
that kind of the right place, the right time, doing the
Mm.
right thing, it just all syncs up. So I think I was so curious, and I think I am curious naturally as a person. So I was so curious as to where this was going to take me and what this was about. And what had just happened. I remember sitting in my car after I left him that day, and I'm just sitting there, like literally, like on the one hand, my life has just changed forever. And on the other hand, what the heck just happened?
Yeah.
You know, but he immediately started coming to me in dreams. I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
it wasn't even a day before I
Mm.
started having dreams or hearing him in my head again telepathically. So he didn't give me much time
Yeah.
to try to figure it out. He was just giving me instruction.
So I'm imagining, Susie, so you're like, okay, I'm helping you tether back in or get into your body. And are you doing this by showing up as a conscious being? Is there some technique or what does that look like?
Well, thousands of kids have come after this because this is what
Yeah.
I do all day, every day now. But that very first time, it was like it was like when I connected to the broader part of him, the part of him that knows,
Mm-hmm.
higher self, whatever you want to call that. When I connected with that, he knew exactly what he needed to come in. And so it wasn't so much that I knew, I was just a very good listener. And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes it was, I need you to bring, color or tuning forks, or I need you to
Oh,
bring paper
yeah.
and pencil so I can
Okay.
write some things down for you, or that telepathic message I just gave you the other day. I want you to ask me questions about that, when you come
Mm-hmm.
next time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And mind you, I'm still pretending to be a speech language pathologist.
Love
So
that.
I was a little incognito, right? And I just kept
Yeah.
asking him, can I say something to your mom? Like if I say something to your
Yeah.
mom, say. And at first it was like, no, she won't understand yet.
Mm-hmm.
So to answer your question, it's like
Yeah.
every single one of these kids, sometimes they aren't interested in an integration process. Sometimes
Yeah.
they just want to get information to their parents that they couldn't get otherwise. So I act as a bridge that way. But when the kids do want to integrate, they already know what they need.
Yeah. I
Again, I'm
love
just,
that.
yeah.
That's so beautiful because it's like they do know what they need. These like the soul is evolved, and yes, there are I don't want to say deficits, deficiencies, differences. That's the word. Where it's like,
Challenges.
yeah, like if I don't have a language or something specific is happening, that's where I feel like the energy of language is really powerful because there you go. And you're making me think of some stories I want to share with you. One, actually, my own son who wasn't verbal and
Mm.
he just didn't have the language, whatever that was. He didn't have the language. And I kept going, it'll get there, it'll get there. But I had such a bond with him. I knew what he was saying because we were energetically communicating mostly, and we still kind of do. And now he's 14. But in the beginning, in the world, the world has an expectation for us. Like, where are his words? And, we even took him to get tested, like right at the age of 3. And it was like, they said, we don't know what's wrong with him. He has they said phonological articulation issues. And I'm just like, huh. And I realized I call him my kinesthetic energies child. And I've labeled him as clairvoyant and clairsentient. So I was like, there you
Uh,
go. Like that's not recognized. And he was a little bit of Waldorf school and then homeschooled, and now he has this most incredible holistic education. That's just like I cry because it's so awesome. And it's because he's learning the way he learns, not the way other people. And he was later diagnosed with dyslexic learning reading and other things. And so I'm just kind of like he's kind of like his mom. Definitely so. But his is, is different for him. But just being a part of that, it's like there is a lot of pressure. And my other story I want to share with you, I worked with 0 to 3. And when you were sharing that story, I came from psychology where I would be in the room of psychoanalysts at times, and I couldn't say it was telepathic communication with kids.
Yeah.
I was like, how do I put this in a way? And then I think that's where I started to separate from that, as I'm sure you have too, to create whatever it was. But when I was an infant development therapist, and this little boy, I don't honestly know if he may have passed on. He was so sweet. He had microencephaly. Do you know what that is? Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of
He
them.
and it was a very impoverished family. She had a few children, and I don't know what it was. I printed out how to be telepathic with your baby, like your toddler. I mean, he was 2.5, 3, but he was like probably 6 months, right? I would come, he was blind, sit him in my lap, and he would just laugh, and we would play toys. And I told the mom, I feel like here, maybe you can read this. And that was me really jumping out of the box. I was like, what am I doing? I'm gonna be fired? Like, I don't know. And she received it. And with this little boy, I fell in love with him. I'm not gonna lie. Like I did a lot for this. I went way beyond and did other things for this family because they were just so pure and he was so sweet. And one day, here's the telepathic thing that comes in, you'd appreciate. One day I walked in and he showed himself to me as an older gentleman with a derby hat. And then I
Oh,
thought,
nice.
I heard him telling me like, this is who I really am.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and I had nobody at the time to talk to about it. I was just like, okay, he's this man with the derby hat. Like, so he's this older, refined, who knows? Was it a past life? Was it what he saw himself as in this little body? And I'm sure you have interesting stories like similar.
Yeah, I mean, both with my own children, I have four daughters, and both with them and my grandchildren and these kids, it's like I do feel like, where there is love, where there is appreciation, where there's curiosity around a child, where there's a deep desire to make some kind of connection. You know, I think that telepathic communication comes very naturally. And, that whole mother's intuition and that kind of thing that, we hear about and that that's all there too. But I think this piece about telepathic communication, like communicating beyond just the physical mechanism of communication. And, with my own kids, I remember I just had this memory the other day, which made me laugh. I had four daughters, so in order to get everybody, out of the house at a decent time,
Oh my
we had
gosh.
this
Yeah.
shower, right? We had a huge shower in the master bedroom, and all the girls would come in. They'd all like I'd wash their hair, whatever, and then
Oh my
they'd go
gosh.
out,
Yeah.
and my husband at the time would, dry them off and whatever. But at one point, I was pregnant doing that. And the one that I was pregnant with, the youngest one, Laura, she would like literally, I would hear her telepathically the whole time we were in the
Wow.
shower. She couldn't wait to get here so that she could play in the shower with all of us. I mean, it was like, and it was,
Oh, yeah.
and even when she was like a brand new little one, we'd literally put her, like sit her on the ground in there as well, and she'd play around. But again, it's like that messaging was already there. She had come to me before she was born because they had told me she was a boy. And
Interesting.
we moved in like my 8th month. So
Oh, wow.
I went to have an ultrasound for the new doctor wanted this ultrasound. He said, "Do you know what you're having?" "Yeah, I think I'm having a boy." And they said, "No." It's like the night before that, I had already had a boy name, all that. That night, Laura comes to me in a dream and she said, "I'm a girl and I do have a name." And the next day I go and I have the ultrasound. They
Wow.
go, "It's a girl. What are you going to name her?" So,
Wow.
well, I mean, that kind of stuff happens. But as far as the kids on the spectrum are concerned, I think because so many of these kids don't have verbal communication, and because they're not as connected to the density of that physical body, they have access to all kinds of worlds and realities that many of us just don't have access to. And, so I think that, just like a blind child, has other senses. They touch and they feel and they hear and that's all heightened. If you don't have verbal communication, it just makes sense to me that you would be communicating on a different level. And to me, telepathy is just that. It's communication. I feel like it's heart to heart communication or soul to soul communication. And and it doesn't what the kids say to me all the time is, you know, words, human expression, human words are so dense. And half the
Mm,
time they're not even true. Half the time um, they always used to say that behavior is the highest form of communication. And when I asked them, well, what does that mean? Why are you saying that? They would say, well, think about how many people you know who say things and their behavior doesn't match. Why would we want to learn a denser form of communication when we can stay in this pure
mm,
realm of connected heart, connected thought, connected wisdom? Why do we have to drop it down into the falsities of human conditioning, right? We're all conditioned to, how are you doing? Hi, I'm having a great day. When somebody's like really hurt.
yeah. Yeah,
Is that,
wow. This
yeah.
this feels really important. When you're saying that, I'm thinking about I didn't work a lot with like I did 0 to 3 and there was one or two because 0 to 3 they're not diagnosing really like in the as because I worked with speech and occupational therapists but I had this different role and I'm thinking a few times where I had kids that looked like they were going to be have other autism whatever and, the parents are freaking out, right? And then I'm thinking of a time I was helped like my friend. I thought I was going to work there and it didn't work out. And she owned this company and there were teenagers and they were very, movement or doing certain repetitive things. And I was like, what is my role here? And I realized why it didn't work out was because they were doing really hard behavioral things like grabbing and pulling and like I don't do that. And I
Right.
remember feeling like, what is happening? Because then later on, when I've connected with other autistic children and teens, I agree with you. There is a certain energy that can be very wise and like, whoa. But then they're in this world going, I need to function the way other people want me to function. And I think that's where I really got like, well, they don't want to function that way, but I know that they have to. I hate the word saying have to, but like, their parents are trying to make them more functional in this reality. But is that fair or unfair? Like, what? Yeah.
Well, it's whether it's fair or unfair, it's not going to happen because
Okay, there you
what I
go.
know, what I know about this
Yeah.
population is it's almost like if they had a prime directive, if they had a soul directive,
Mm,
it's to remain connected to who they actually are.
mm,
And so you have this soul that comes in and says, okay, I'm this big being and I've got all this potential and I'm excited for life. And then that soul comes into a body and that body is, functioning within the restrictions, constrictions of a certain family dynamic. And I'm not saying that family dynamics are bad or wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying that energetic environment is very different than the energetic environment of who we are in truth. And so these kids are like they're staying in that truth, if you will.
mm,
And then
mm,
what happens is, with all good intent, parents come forth or professionals come forth and they say, let me help you. Let me help you function in the world. But they do that from a place of, these are all the things I'm afraid of,
mm,
or these are all the things that might happen to you because they happen to me.
mm,
There's a little bit of or a lot of projection that
Mm,
goes on. So
yeah.
what you have happening is you have these kids that are trying to come in, they want to integrate, they want to be here, but they come up against fear, worry, concern, anxiety, stress, overwhelm, which any parent who has a kid who has any kind of special needs is going to
Yeah.
have. It's just that it can't work that way. And I know it for a fact because when kids are asking for help with integration, they're always asking their parents to de-stress. They're
Mm,
asking their parents to go through processes of maybe doing some inner child work or starting to release some of those places and spaces within themselves where they're holding kind of a heavier energy.
mm.
And what's beautiful is as the parents are clearing that heavy
Wow.
energy, then the kids start making their way in. And I've seen crazy behaviors just shift
Wow. Yeah.
as, it's like we start addressing, with some love, compassion, and
Mm,
understanding, start addressing these things. And it's nobody's fault and there's no blame, shame, or, guilt to be had here. Although I know there's a lot of that.
yeah.
Parents who have kids who have
Mm,
any kind of, I mean, any kind of challenges.
yeah.
So, but these kids definitely came in for a particular
Mm,
experience, they're having a particular soul's journey, if you will. And they're just inviting us over and over again to see parts of ourselves that we haven't been able to see before,
mm.
love parts of ourselves that we haven't been able to love before. And some pretty miraculous things happen when we start, engaging with them in that way. So,
I do notice, like thinking about certain boys, especially, I'm gonna, we see this. I mean, I haven't even the 0 to 3 work, but even in just the past years, just interacting with other children, I can like, I'm like you, I could like pick up and feel everything, and you know, and so some of these boys that have come into my energetic space, just like walking by or hanging out at one like a function, they're very, I almost feel like their empathic energy is so strong, like they feel so much. And I've actually had a few clients like wanting to be mothers who were neurodiverse. And I'm like, oh, and I just really validate like, wow, you're not just an empath, but you're like feeling the world. And then that's a
yeah.
lot. I'm like, that's a lot. And because some people feel shame as adults, like, oh, it's too loud, or I have to wrap myself in a blanket. And I go, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's like that's your system. And that's how you're like tuning in. And I'm thinking it's different with females, like as males, right? Because I feel like I know a lot of women friends that are probably in that space, but like it's never been looked at because I don't know. It looks different. But also these women have really struggled. Like they think something's wrong with them, or and it's like, oh, you're just your unique soul self, but you have a certain sensitivity. And how to then yeah, just my observation is that feeling, is like, wow, that's really intense. And maybe it's because it's a very active area for me. Maybe they're teaching me that. Like
Right.
when I feel them in my space, and they sometimes come really close in my space, I'm like, whoa. I'm just like, it makes me want to ground my body. And like, I don't want to be reading the room, right? Like, I really don't. Like, I don't think it's healthy, but I wonder if some of these children maybe they want to read the room, or maybe they need help on, what do you think?
Well,
Yeah.
uh, well, let me speak to them coming so close into your space too,
Yeah.
or
Like
and or
even physically though too.
yeah,
I'm like,
no, I
whoa.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. They're like sometimes it's
Yeah.
like, okay, wait a minute. But but again, let's think about them as they're vibrational beings first. And so when they're reading the room, you might say they're reading it not even really at a body
Mm.
level or an emotional level or what,
Mm.
they're reading the vibration of that person. And so uh, after a while, I took it as a compliment. You know, if a child diagnosed with autism is going to make eye contact with me, or if he's going to come and snuggle up into my energy field, and
Yeah.
that feels like it's personally very close, but he's kind of wrapping himself up in my energy field, I'm now taking that as a compliment
Oh, I
because
like
I
that.
think that I would suggest the same for you too, because
Yeah.
what they're doing is they're going, oh, she's the empath. She's the one that's
Yeah.
sensitive. She's the one that it's safe to be me with,
Yeah. And
right?
I do get bumped too. Do you know what I mean? Like bumped and touched.
Yes.
And in
Yes.
my mind, I'm going, like there was this event and it's like a Cub Scout, Boy Scout event. And I remember my husband's one of the like head people and he's like, oh, you know, that kid's, and I go, no, I know. I was like, you don't have to say it. Like he just, I'm like, it's registered. But I said, I think in my mind I had that judgment of like autistic diagnosis, like they don't want to touch you or you know, but it's been really changing. I'm like, oh, they always want to touch me or bump into me, which I'm okay with. But I register right away the empath energy is really strong. But I probably go into my trigger of like, that must be hard. But what you're saying is like, maybe it's not that hard, that they're registering a different frequency that, yeah,
I
yeah,
I think it I think it is very challenging for them to be in a room of people where all eyes are on them and everybody thinks
yeah,
there's something wrong with them. But I also think that because they're tuned into vibration first, that they
yeah,
are going to find those people in the room that are
makes
maybe
sense.
more vibrationally empathetic
Mm,
and maybe can see beyond the physical, like
mm,
can feel them, you might say, can feel that
yeah,
energy instead of just start diagnosing them or start making them
yeah.
feel bad about the physicality. And my my own children used to say when I very first started doing this work, they go, Mom, these kids follow you everywhere. And I, in the bookstore, in the grocery store, and
Wow.
enough, it's like, and but I think that again, it's we could say like energy attracts like energy, but we also could say that, yeah, I mean, these kids spend their whole lives being ostracized because they're completely in there and yet their bodies are not doing what their neurology is
Mm,
asking to do. So on the outside, they look like they're flapping and screaming and, up on their toes and
yeah.
running and giggling. But that's the body. It's like the body's doing something completely different than what's going on inside. I have kids all the time that say, especially spellers, that'll say, like they just hit somebody or they just did something. It's like, and then they literally type right out, that's not what I was intending to do.
Oh,
It's like
interesting.
that wasn't,
Yeah.
so that the physical body, and I never thought about it this way, but it just had an aha myself. It's like the physical body is the body of this domain, this third dimensional domain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the mental body, the other bodies are more connected maybe to that essence. So the essence, the mental body, they're hearing everything. They understand.
Mm,
They're all of it. But the physical body is in a different vibrational frequency.
mm-hmm.
Yep. And so there's another mismatch.
As you say that, I'm going into this idea of now the parents, right? And even the siblings. So we even talk about the siblings, like, and maybe the siblings are telepathic, or maybe parents, like, how are you like teaching them? Or maybe you're just being like, I don't know how that looks. Like, are you doing teaching, but also you're listening, getting information? Like, how do parents get to like, how do parents get to do that, connect in that? Yeah.
So first, let's go to the siblings. Most siblings are telepathic with their siblings.
I love that.
And especially younger, I think all kids are pretty much
Yeah.
telepathic when they're younger. Um, And autistic individuals just don't grow out of that,
Mm,
whereas we start to develop language over time. We turn off the telepathy and we turn on the verbal language.
mhm.
They don't turn on the verbal language, so they keep the telepathy part. As far as the parents are concerned, it's like different people come for different reasons, Kelly. Like some parents have never heard their kids say a word.
Wow.
And so they come and they're like, can you connect with him and just help me answer these questions?
Mm, mhm.
And so that's a great way to start to build a relationship, to create a bridge between their child's world and their world. So a lot of times that's kind of where things start. But parents definitely, professionals too, come in and say, I do want to be more telepathic.
Mm,
And what I tell everybody is number one, we already are telepathic. We all are. We just got conditioned out of it. So, you know, some really basic exercises where, you're just sitting in a room with your child, without verbally communicating with them, and just close your eyes for a second. How does it
mm.
feel? What does it look like? What are you thinking about? Because you're in that space with them. Those kinds of things can naturally and organically kind of create a connection that, in our busy lives, we don't stop long enough to just sit in a room with somebody
Yeah.
and not do or talk to them. It's like, but it's a really good exercise, especially not always just mothers, but especially mothers, I will say, because, we've got the DNA connection, we've got
Mm,
the nurturing connection, we've got the behavioral connection. So just, I tell parents a lot too, when your kid's doing something strange, you know, do it with them. Like literally enter their world. If they're flapping, flap. If
oh,
they're up on their
wow.
toes and
Yeah.
down, go up on your toes and down. And the reason that that works is one, now you have a kid that says, oh my gosh, my parents don't think this is weird. They're doing it with me.
Oh, yeah.
And two, when you start moving like they're moving, it's much easier to register some of the experiences that they might be having.
Mm.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of fun ways to make those connections, but
Sorry.
at the end of the day, I'm really looking to create this bridge between where the parent is in that moment and where the child is. And I think there's a huge misnomer that these kids don't want to be here, or they're
Mm.
just trying to be difficult,
Wow.
or some of those, and it's none of it's true. They all want to make that connection. They just
Yeah.
can't abdicate who they actually are in order to make that connection. So they're
Yeah, I
kind of
see.
inviting
Yeah,
us,
yeah, yeah.
like, you come here. It's like, and
Mm,
that's why so many of these parents, they, I mean, thousands of clients now, and they all say the same thing. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm really started my own spiritual journey or my own inner
mm,
inquiry
mhm,
once I had this kid,
mm,
and I'm like, yeah, that's because their frequency is really high. That's what they're
mm.
inviting you to. And for those parents that get that and take that as an opportunity, they have amazing experiences with these kids. The ones that fight it, it's not so fun. Yeah.
Yeah, because we do see a lot of that, or I hear from friends or other people. It's like, yeah, I love how you shared that. That feels so beautiful of like matching the energy. Like if your kid is, lining up stuff like I know that's a repetitive thing, and I think that's where I didn't fit in that environment because they were like, no, we don't do it like that. I wanted to like let them do something, and I felt really bad because I was like, oh, I'm doing it wrong. Maybe I'm not helping them. But the realization, of course, later was like I needed to work more probably energetically, telepathically.
Yeah.
But if it's not welcomed, what are you supposed to do, right? That's the hard
Right.
part. It's the attunement and the slowing down and our own inner listening. But I think of like friends and that feel frustrated or they're watching their kid have anger and anxiety. And I feel like your resource is so awesome, but are there other resources that look at this the way you do, actually? Do you feel you've seen, connected?
More so now than, I
Yeah.
mean, literally just like within the last, year, with the
Really?
telepathy tapes
Okay.
coming out.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, it was interesting in January of 2024, so last year, I started hearing the kids say, "We're going to land. We're coming in. We're going to land." And, I'm notorious for hearing things about 10, 20 years ahead of the game.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'll hear it and I kind of go, at this point, I go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I kind of tune it out. This time they kept saying, no, it's like we're going to land. It's like this is going to come into collective awareness. And
Mm.
then that same year, I was invited to do a podcast that reached, hundreds of thousands of people. And I'm thinking,
Wow.
first time, I thought, okay, that's weird.
Wow.
And then within 2 months of that, the telepathy tapes came out by Kai Dickens. And the whole thing is about the telepathic communication of non-speaking individuals,
Wow.
non-speaking autistics. And it's kind of mind-boggling. It's like when you've worked in a particular field and worked in a particular way
Mm.
for decades
Mm.
and know this, I mean, telepathy is as common to me as speaking to you now, right? But what's fascinating is when it comes out in the masses like that, all of a sudden
Show
are
up.
the
Oh.
resources are just they're and I will say too, it's like everybody who's ever had a connection with an autistic child
Mm.
is having a conversation out there right now. So it's like there's so
Mm.
many people to pick from and resonate with or not resonate
Yeah.
with, tune into. So I think the telepathy tapes is a great place to start, for people that
I
would
love
like
that.
to.
Yeah.
That's on any podcast, any place that you get a podcast, you can find it there. But so big, in fact, it bumped Joe Rogan of all people off the number one.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love it.
I mean,
That's
how does that
great.
happen? And
You're like,
so they
here, we need to get this energy out here. Here you go.
exactly. So there are many, many more resources now
I
than
like
there have
that.
ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something, yeah, I want to kind of, yeah, even just kind of hook into this telepathy conversation. And as you shared earlier, you had that during pregnancy and telepathy, I do talk about on and off from time to time within, spirit baby communication and preconception, the before life. And that it's just like this mind to mind thing. I was like, I tell women like, how do your babies, like, not that they're like they're growing in you, but they're also, I feel like the soul's just hanging out. But there's
They're
that
just in the
connection.
field.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, in the field. I like that, in the field. So it makes me think about like in my family, we're all telepathically connected because sometimes I'll just think of something and then they walk in the room and talk about it. And it's something so random, like there was no leading to it. It makes me laugh when
yes,
that happens because I'm
yes.
like, oh, okay. And my cats are very telepathic because they need to
Oh,
be.
yes, yes,
Like, hey,
amazing.
are you gonna feed me? Oh, shoot. Like, okay, I
Yes.
got a lot of stuff happening and other people need to step up, but sometimes I'm like the one that's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna feed you, but I'm like, well, why isn't anybody else here, these cats? That's not fair.
But I mean, we know that our pets are telepathic. We know that our pets read our emotions. They've even done studies where dogs know that their owners are coming home like 20
Yeah,
minutes
I
before.
know. Oh my gosh, we had this my brother said when my dad he would when he was alive, he would know. He's like, I don't know how the dog did it. It'd be like 10 minutes before and he's like on a train somewhere. And I'm like, that is really, yeah, I love that you said that. That's true. What is that? Like, what is that, right?
Well, yeah, and we accept it as part of, that animal nature, that pet nature.
Mm,
But so why is it so hard to think that human beings have that? You
mm,
know, and why is it so hard to think that somebody that doesn't verbally communicate, or have spoken language would be able to have that kind of connection? So
mm,
it's interesting. I'm kind of watching right now because um, a lot of people say, well, these kids look like they're so disconnected. Like they
mm,
look like they're not here.
mm,
And I'm kind of going, is that a big mirror too?
mm.
Are there ways in which we as human beings have just,
Yes.
we're disconnected from ourselves. Most of us don't
Yeah.
know how we feel. Most of us, are stuck in our heads or on our devices. There's
Yes.
all kinds of ways in which we're not connected to each other. And
Yeah,
these kids
that
are always connected to us, and yet we're calling them
wow.
the
So,
quote unquote
yeah, yeah,
disordered
this
ones.
is really good. I want to go into that because yeah, what that so I've said this before, we have special needs in our family and something will come up and I'll say, well, they're just being in their real emotion that you can't be in, or you're suppressing it, you're holding it back. They're just being real. It's like, or like, oh, they're too angry or they're too this. And I'm like, but are they? Because they're just being real. Like we're not being real. So that really makes a lot of sense. And I'm hoping those tuning in really absorb that it's like, there's such, yeah, I feel like what you're sharing too, there's such deep reflection when we have others in our lives that are just differently able and just see the world and perceive it, whether it's autism or other special needs. And it makes me very curious because I do know the sovereign soul and that mission is very unique. It's like that is the unique journey to that being. And then everything else around, it's like the interaction with ourselves, but with our environment. Because it's always like, oh, this family member, they're so difficult because they're blah, blah, blah. But I'm always going, well, maybe it's because they're being real. Like,
Yeah,
honestly, like
yeah,
you're just, and it's easy for me because I could see the dynamic of something outside the family. Like it's a part of the family, but it's like the brother, sister, and I'm always like, huh, that's interesting. But
right.
yeah, it's easy to almost feel like, and maybe you see this a lot in families. Well, if there's an issue or a problem, it's like that's them. It's not me. I was like,
Yes.
whoa, that's huge.
Yeah. Well, and two things, Kelly. One, Riley, that very first little boy, when I first met him, and I didn't understand this teaching that he was giving me then
Yeah.
until fairly recently, quite frankly. But he
Mm.
would always say to me, he would say, there's the real world, and then there's your world. And I was kind of looking at
Oh,
him. And my ego
wow.
mind identity
Yeah.
was going crazy. It's like, no, you're the one that's out there in outer space somewhere, and I'm the one that's in the
Mm.
real world, right? And he goes,
Interesting.
no, your world is not the real world. I'm in the real world. I'm in the real world of who I am in truth.
Yeah.
You're in a lesser version of that,
Mm.
and so and that was fascinating to me, this whole thing about being real that you were just talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
The kids have also said around being real is when I asked them very first, like if there's something I can say to your parents, like just give them something. What do you want me to
Oh,
give them?
yeah, yeah.
And they would say, just tell them that we don't care how they feel. We care that they know how they feel. They
Wow.
need to be real with their feelings.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, whoa, every parent on the planet is taught to hide their feelings from their kids. Like if you're
Yeah.
afraid, you want to protect your child.
Yeah.
And that might work fairly reasonably for a neurotypical child. But for a child diagnosed with autism who's wide
Mm.
open, read your mind,
Mm.
read your thoughts, read your feelings all the time, When you say you're happy and you're sad, now they're just
Mm,
confused.
yeah.
And what they go about doing is they go about trying to show you where you might actually be sad so that you'll feel
Mm,
that. And so what's fascinating to me, it's like they would say, just be real.
mm,
Just authenticity in this population is huge. And just what you said about your family, it's like,
yeah.
yeah, maybe they're just feeling the feeling that you can't feel. That's
Yeah, look at
exactly.
he's expressing it. She's expressing it
Yes,
like, but it's
yes.
like, but that would take that would be then it would make them have to take personal responsibility for their feelings, which they're not going to. That's a
Well,
whole other conversation, right?
that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you flat out that, and I've seen it, like I say, so many kids and so many families, when somebody will start being real, when they will
Mm,
start being authentic, their lives with their kids do
mm,
get much easier, much faster. And it doesn't have anything to do whether this kid becomes verbal or learns to spell. It doesn't have to do with any of that. It has to do with, am I in reaction or am I in response?
mm,
Right? And for the parent that can learn to process their emotions, process some of this energy, that's regulation, right? We're emotionally
mm.
regulating. Guess what happens when the parent emotionally regulates? This kid who looks so dysregulated becomes regulated, emotionally regulated,
Wow.
or at least more so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Susie, we're coming up to the end, and I could talk to you for hours. There's so many really great things, and I'm hoping that it could just provide those that are tuning in that are neurodiverse or that have children, like to really look. I mean, what I got from it was just the energetic piece of who we are and our own soul's path. It's like, and there's so much learning in that. It's not just like, okay, I'm enlightened, like here we go. It's, we're here ongoing, and I just really appreciate you coming, sharing, and I want you to share ways that others can get your book, your website, and I will have it in the show notes, but I want you to just share it verbally as well.
Yeah, I think Amazon's probably the best place for the book for awesomeism. And then my website is susymiller.com. So just susymiller.com. And another book that I do suggest to just about all parents, any parent, but definitely parents of kids on the spectrum, is The Presence Process by Michael Brown, which is also on Amazon. And the reason I love it is it just gives us a way to literally a very methodical way of processing some of those emotions that, can be really heavy, really strong when you're dealing with a child that needs you 24/7. So,
Mm.
yeah, so that's a good resource too.
Well, thank you. And any before we come to the end, any final just last words you can share to those tuning in?
Um, I think that it's just really important to know that just because a body looks a particular way does not mean that a kid's not in there.
Mm.
And I think it's really important to presume competence. I think it's really important to maybe even presume that there's a competence that we as neurotypical individuals just don't have yet. So there's a lot we can learn from these kids. So stay open. They'll take you on a ride. So,
Thank you so much, Susie, for being here. And I want to thank everyone for joining episode 209, April 2025, The Children for the New Earth. Every child heals our planet. Thank you for joining Spirit Baby Radio with your host, me, Kelly Meehan. Please join my community and stay in touch with monthly energy rants, Spirit Baby poetry, and get access to Spirit Baby 101 with tips and practices at my newsletter at newearthchildren.com. And join me on Instagram with lives at Spirit Baby Medium, and join the Mighty Networks, the Spirit Baby Collective membership, and Motherhood to Mediumship. Remember, you are the heart that holds communication, and it is your time to connect. Come share in the great shift of your mind and the true spirit of your heart with Spirit Baby Communication.